Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajacharya Astottara Satishi Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sukaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Ki Jai. Gangamayi Ki Jai. Jamuna Mayi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 4, written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We're in the chapter describing Srila Prabhupada's activities when he went to London to establish the temple there. Not since Prabhupada had first left India in 1965 had he preached to Indians as extensively as now. Indians would always attend his lectures, and even if they didn't dance and chant, they appreciated Krishna consciousness. Even before Prabhupada's arrival in England, a few Indians had stepped forward to help the devotees. And now the majority of Prabhupada's occasional guests at Tittenhurst were Indians. Bringing their families, they would sit and chat with Prabhupada, often inviting him to their homes for dinner. So naturally, because London is the capital of the British Empire, and since India had been a colony of India, many Indians had migrated to London. And now that Prabhupada had come and was about to establish his temple, the Indians were very happy to meet Prabhupada. And they invited him, they extended their help to him, opening their homes, having programs, sometimes monetary help. And many of those Indians even took initiation from Srila Prabhupada. We had here in our community His Grace Manudas Prabhu. So he was one of the first Indian disciples of Srila Prabhupada in London. We also had previously, he's now gone back to Godhead, Kiradakshai Vishnu Swami, So he also was very instrumental in helping Prabhupada, he and his family. Kedarnath Gupta. Kedarnath Gupta became Kiradakshay Vishnu Das, and his sons also became disciples of Srila Prabhupada. This is Kedarnath Gupta right here next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada agreed to come to our house. We received him with a warm welcome, and many other people also came to hear him. He was very much pleased to see that we had our family deities of Radha and Krishna given by my mother, and he commented, "I am very much pleased to come to this place and see that Radha and Krishna are here." So even before Srila Prabhupada arrived, Radha and Krishna were already residing in England because the devotees from India had brought their family deities there to London. He gave a very nice lecture and told that the purpose of the human form of life is self-realization. He said one should be inquisitive to know who he is. All those assembled who had come to hear him were very much pleased and impressed by his lecture. After his lecture, I did the arti, and we offered the foodstuffs to the deity. And then we distributed prasadam to everyone. Prabhupada took the prasadam, and he was very much pleased to take prasadam in our house. As he was leaving, I requested him, "When can I see you next?" He said, "You can see me anytime you want." So eventually, just soon after this was in September of 1969, Srila Prabhupada was going, this is the next chapter coming up, he was going to return to India for the World Sankirtan Party, and he invited Kedarnath Gupta, who had taken Diksha by that time, Kiradakshay Vishnu, to come and help him here in India. So he was one of the founding members of our temple when it was at the Radha Damodar temple. He also purchased land here, just nearby Fogalashram, and he created a Vanaprastha ashram in his home. Some devotees would stay there with him. He also helped with the printing of the Bhagavad Darshan magazine. He would write articles and he would edit the magazine. So he was quite instrumental helping Prabhupada both in London and then later here in North India. This is a picture of Prabhupada lecturing at the Hindu Center in London. Sometimes there would be disagreements over philosophy, but Prabhupada's arguments were always convincing. The Indians were respectful to Prabhupada and repeatedly invited him to their homes. One of Britain's most prominent and respected Indians visited, Praful Patel, as did many businessmen with the means to help Prabhupada's mission, but few were willing to sacrifice. So whereas when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati sent his sannyasis to London, they aimed for the royalty, and they were trying to influence the royalty to become devotees. Whereas Srila Prabhupada, he went for the grassroots. He went for the common people. He went for the youth. He went for the people who were looking for spiritual life. And that's how Prabhupada's International Society for Krishna Consciousness spread all over Europe from this first attempt to build a temple in London. Both the Indian community and the youth were very interested in the philosophy that Srila Prabhupada was preaching. The second moon landing by American astronauts was scheduled for mid-November, only a few weeks away. For months, the moonshots had received much press coverage, and Prabhupada would speak of them often. Almost a year ago in Los Angeles, he had answered a reporter's queries on the possibility of man's landing on the moon. Prabhupada said, "Just like we are going from one place to another by motor car or by airplane, this mechanical process will not help us go to the moon planet. The process is different, as described in the Vedic literature. One has to qualify. According to our literature, our information, it is not possible. In this body, we cannot go there." So Srila Prabhupada, as a Bhakti Vedantist, he was speaking on the authority of the Vedas, that in order to go to the moon planet, which is considered to be a heavenly planet with sense gratification far greater than what we have here in the Earth planet, and the bodies are also different. According to the atmosphere, even on this planet, if you live in the water, you have a predominantly watery body. If you live in the air, like the birds, they have an airy body so they can fly in the air. And we human beings, we have a body composed of earth and water and things, because that's how we have to live. So in order to go to the moon planet, you can't go there with an earthly body, because you need a different type of body to go there. So Srila Prabhupada, he had Vedic science to support what he was saying. Now we have other people who also did not believe that the humans went to the moon. There were conspiracy theorists. I just took one little quote because there were so many conspiracy theories at that time that it was impossible that the NASA actually attained going to the moon. Conspiracy theorists claim that NASA faked the landings to avoid humiliation and to ensure that it continued to get funding. NASA raised about US $30 billion to go to the moon. And K-Singh claimed in his book that this could have been used to pay off many people. Since most conspiracists believe that sending men to the moon was impossible at the time, they argue that landing had to be faked to fulfill Kennedy's, that was the president at that time, President Kennedy, before that, 1961 goal. Before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. In fact, NASA accounted for the cost of Apollo is the name of the satellites, the Sputniks, to the US Congress in 1973, totaling US dollars 25.4 billion. Now, if anyone has ever gone to America, there's a part of America, just like we have the Thar Desert in Gujarat. The Thar Desert, not many people live there because it's a desert. There's not much vegetation. So there's one part of America in Nevada, New Mexico, down near the southern border. It's complete desert. And for hundreds of miles, there are barricades. Do not enter, no trespassing, US government, warning. No human being can enter that area of the desert. You're driving your car and then suddenly the highway goes all the way around this particular area of America. So in America, those people who didn't believe the scientists, who could understand this conspiracy theory, they say that all that moon landing, all the shows, all of the pictures and the photos, all happened there in the desert. And that's why nobody was allowed there. So it wasn't only Srila Prabhupada who didn't believe that the men didn't go to the moon. It was other intelligent people as well. At Tiddenhurst, Prabhupada often brought up the moon landing while talking with his disciples. The moon landing was a hoax, he said one evening in his room, for they cannot go to the moon. The moon planet, Chandraloka, is a residence of the demigods. higher beings than these drunkards and cow-eating slaughterers who are trying to inhabit it. You cannot think this travel is allowed. Like when I migrated from India to the US, the moon planet cannot be visited so quickly. It is not possible. So just for Srila Prabhupada to go from one little country on the earth planet to another country, it took him so much trouble, so many permits, so many papers, passport, visa, payments, ticket, and that's just within one planet. What to speak of going from one planet to another planet? So Prabhupada was using logic to help these young people understand they shouldn't be hoaxed by the scientists. Srila Prabhupada's disciples accepted his statements. He was giving not simply his opinion, but the verdict of the Vedic scriptures. Because he accepted Vedic authority over modern science, so did his disciples, but not Purushottam. Purushottam was Prabhupada's personal servant at the time, who had come with him from America to England. He would massage him, he would cook for him sometimes, he would set out his things when Prabhupada was giving classes, just as we have any of the gurus you'll see, they all have their personal servant just to take care of their needs so they can go on with their preaching work without difficulty. So Purushottam was trained by Prabhupada to do that. Purushottam believed that the humans did go to the moon. Detecting Purushottam's dubious mentality, Prabhupada would often joke lightly in Purushottam's presence. Someone would ask a question, "Where's Janaki?" And Prabhupada would reply, "Oh, Janaki is gone to the moon." Then everyone except Purushottam would laugh. This is Purushottam in the new temple that they were constructing. The devotees knew of Purushottam's difficulty. He was an American and proud that the Americans were conquering space. It was a space race because the Cold War was going on in the 1960s. It was the capitalists against the communists. And there was a theory. The theory was that a domino theory. We had discussed this about 2 years ago during the Vietnam War crisis in America when the devotees were just joining in 1966 and 1967. So the two blocks were the capitalists were the Americans with the Europeans assisting them, and then the communist bloc. That was the Iron Curtain that split across Europe. And the communist bloc had taken over so many little countries after World War II, and they were spreading their influence now into India. We have the Marxists and the Naxalites, and then into Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam and so many small countries between China, which was also communist, and Russia. So the big space race was who was going to get the moon. They were getting little countries everywhere with their imperialistic triumphs, but the next big country was going to be the moon. So America, they wanted to get there first before the Russians could get there. So therefore they made this big hoax that they had reached the moon before the Russians. So it was more than just a scientific experiment. There was a whole war going on here on this planet, and they wanted to extend it to the moon planet. And they knew that Prabhupada was joking about it. Purushottam was up on the latest scientific advancements. He was impressed by NASA's achievements. NASA is an abbreviation for National Aeronautics Scientific Agency, something like that. We just call it NASA. And astronaut Neil Armstrong's giant step for mankind. So Neil Armstrong supposedly was the first astronaut who stepped his feet onto the moon, and there, he planted the American flag right in the middle of the desert in Nevada and New Mexico, which they say was the moon. Although Purushottam went on with his duties, he became sullen, and Prabhupada noted his lack of enthusiasm. One morning, Purushottam and Jamuna were together with Prabhupada in his room. Purushottam had several days' growth of beard. This is one of the symptoms when a devotee is having difficulty, when they stop shaving and they start becoming hairy, because in Kali Yuga, beauty is hair. You know, that's why these hippies have all the long hair. So Purushottam, he was having a spiritual difficulty because he did not believe what Prabhupada was saying about the moon. And that manifested. His clothing became dirty. He stopped looking fresh and clean, was not clean shaven anymore, and was wearing the same orange sweater he had slept in. Whereas Jamuna was neat and clean. Although she had only 2 simple cotton saris, she would always put on a freshly washed and ironed one before going to see Prabhupada. Looking at his 2 servants, Prabhupada said, "Jamuna, you have so many saris. They are all so beautiful." Jamuna looked up at Prabhupada in surprise. "I don't have so many, Srila Prabhupada." "No," he said, "you are wearing a new piece of cloth every day. It's so nice. You're always looking so neat and clean. And your tilak. Purushottam, what do you think? Who do you think has the best tilak?" Purushottam didn't answer. "Beautiful tilak," Prabhupada said, means beautiful person. So Srila Prabhupada was using the same psychology that we use on little children with his disciples. He wasn't criticizing Purushottam. He was praising another disciple to show how he wanted his other disciple to be. He was praising Jamuna, saying, "You're so neat and clean, your tilak is so perfect." A beautiful tilak means beautiful person. Not as a criticism, not to directly criticize Purushottam, saying, "You've become so dirty, unshaven, look at your dirty you sleep in the same clothes that you're wearing." No, he didn't speak like that. He praised another devotee so that Purushottam could hear that. That's what we do with little children. About 6 o'clock that same evening, Jamuna was cooking puris and potatoes for Prabhupada when she heard him ring the servant's bell. Leaving the ghee on the fire, she ran up to Prabhupada's quarters because Prabhupada was on the first floor and the kitchen was on the ground floor of that little house. He talked with her about the lecture he would give that evening and eventually asked, "When will prasadam be ready? Before the discourse?" "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, Jamuna smelled smoke. "Oh, please excuse me, Prabhupada. I've left some ghee on the fire." Rushing downstairs, she found the kitchen filled with black smoke. She couldn't see the stove. "Purushottam, Purushottam," she cried. Purushottam arrived, and together they groped through the smoke. Somehow, Purushottam extinguished the fire before it caused serious damage. So when this happened in our house, when oil catches fire, the fire flies up into the sky, and you can't put it out with water. You have to smother it so that it doesn't get any oxygen. And there's so much smoke, and the smoke causes the greatest damage because you can't breathe. So it's very, very difficult to put out a ghee or an oil fire. Whereas if it's something else burning, you can just put water on it. So they had this emergency. All of a sudden, the whole kitchen had become black. Purushottam and Jamuna were covered with soot. Their faces were black, and Purushottam's orange sweater, his robes, and Jamuna's sari were all blackened. Suddenly, Prabhupada rang the servant's bell, and they both hurried upstairs to tell him about the fire. When Janaki returned downstairs and saw the mess, she ran upstairs to Prabhupada's room, where Jamuna and Purushottam stood, still covered with soot, before Prabhupada. What has happened here? Janaki burst out. You can remember Janaki and Jamuna were sisters. They were very close. Prabhupada looked at her soberly and said, "Today Purushottam has gone to the moon." Prabhupada was always joking. What? Janaki asked. Prabhupada repeated, "Yes, our Purushottam has gone to the moon." "Prabhupada," Purushottam said, "I am a brahmachari. Why are you saying these things? Being a brahmachari is no restriction from going to the moon. Anyone can go," Prabhupada said, winking. So Prabhupada took the whole incident quite lightly. The devotees regularly encountered John and Yoko. It was their house. It was like 160 acres, beautiful gardens and forests, and a huge mansion where John and Yoko Ono lived. They lived in that mansion, and Prabhupada and his disciples, they lived in the servants' quarters a little distance away. And then there was another building, a palatial building that they used as a temple room. So naturally, because John and Yoko, they owned the place, they would see them sometimes on the grounds. John had, by George Harrison's recommendation, because John needed help with the grounds, to cut the grass, to make sure that the gardening was going on nicely, George suggested, why don't you have the devotees live there and they can work at, a work and live program. They get to live there for free and they'll also do the work for you. So that was more or less a business relationship. John was inclined towards the devotees, but his friends advised him not to get involved with the Swami and his group, so he remained aloof. George Harrison, on the other side, he was quite friendly with the devotees. He had a spiritual side to him. Ishanadas. Ishanadas was the devotee who played the trumpet, and he had a wife, Bibhavati, and a little baby who came with them from Canada. I was in the kitchen working, and John was sitting at the piano. He had a piano in the kitchen, a great upright piano with all the varnish removed, bare wood. And in this way, he was sitting at the piano playing Hare Krishna. The man was actually a great musician, and he played Hare Krishna in every musical idiom you could think of. Bluegrass music, that's a type of country jazz that they have in the West, or classical music, or rock and roll, or whatever. Just like here in India, we have different ragas, and you could sing the Hare Krishna mantra by different ragas according to the time of day and the season. So outside of India, they have different types of musical systems. And John, being an excellent musician, he was chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra by these other different tunes. He would go at will from one idiom to another, always singing Hare Krishna. It was so natural for him. And one could see that he was a musical genius. And in this way, he was entertaining me, and he was obviously really enjoying it. So anyway, while the piano playing was going on with great vigor and enthusiasm, this chanting Hare Krishna, his wife, Yoko Ono, appeared in a nightgown or what have you, and said in a very distressed tone, "Please, John, I have a terrible headache. Can't you stop that sort of thing and come upstairs with me? So, well, there's more to it. We'll read more about this relationship. George was different. He was drawn to Prabhupada. When one of the devotees had asked, "Why out of all the Beatles are only you interested?" George had replied, "It's my karma. One of the things in my sign is the spiritual side." So George Harrison was very interested in Srila Prabhupada and in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. He helped the devotees a great deal. George Harrison. Prabhupada just looked like I thought he would. I had like a mixed feeling of fear and awe about meeting him. That's what I liked about later on after meeting him more. I felt that he was just more like a friend. I felt relaxed. It was much better than at first because I hadn't been able to tell what he was saying. Sometimes Westerners couldn't understand Srila Prabhupada's accent when he spoke English. And I wasn't sure if I was too worldly to even be there. But later I relaxed and felt much more at ease with him. And he was very warm towards me. He wouldn't talk differently to me than to anybody else. He was always just speaking about Krishna, and it was coincidental who happened to be there. So George, he was beginning to understand what it meant to be Krishna conscious. Srila Prabhupada, it didn't matter who he met, it didn't matter where he was, Prabhupada was always the same. He was always just talking about Krishna and trying to encourage people to become Krishna conscious. You could have been a little child, or you could have been a great world-famous musician. Prabhupada would still be talking about Krishna in a very friendly and relaxed manner. This is a picture of Srila Prabhupada and George Harrison with his second wife, and our former temple president, Dhananjaya Prabhu. Dhananjaya also we'll hear about this later in the Lilamrita, he was very instrumental in working with George Harrison, because later, when soon in a few minutes, we'll read about Prabhupada deciding that they had to leave John Lennon's estate because of particular activities going on there. And Prabhupada moved to London town. After that, George Harrison offered to buy a whole estate for Srila Prabhupada and the devotees. And that's what we have now, the Bhakti-Vedanta Manor. So George left it up to Dhananjaya, who at that time was in charge of the devotees, after Mukunda and Gurudas and Shyam Sundar all came here to India with Prabhupada for the World Sankirtan Party. Dhananjaya was in charge there. And it was he who found the Bhakti-Vedanta Manor and made all the arrangements with George Harrison to get the manor in the name of ISKCON. So that's this wonderful picture here with the key players. Whenever you saw him, he would always be the same. It wasn't like one time he would tell you to chant the Hare Krishna mantra, and then the next time say, "Oh no, I made a mistake." He was always the same. Seeing him was always a pleasure. Sometimes I would drop by, thinking I wasn't planning to go, but I better go because I ought to. And I would always come away just feeling so good. I was conscious that he was taking a personal interest in me. It was always a pleasure. George was attracted to Krishna, and he liked to chant. Even before meeting Prabhupada, he had learned something of Krishna from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, from the autobiography of Paramahansa Yogananda, and from traveling in India. But Prabhupada's instructions in particular impressed upon him that Lord Krishna was the absolute truth, the origin of everything. So these particular people who, in the beginning, had some spiritual influence on George Harrison, first is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. So he came to America and he started the Integral Yoga Society, which was well known for something called TM, Transcendental Meditation. And that was it was like a business organization. You would have to pay for your mantras. Everything was like an exchange. You got a secret mantra, you weren't allowed to tell anyone that mantra, you had to pay for it, things like that. So since he was one of the earlier gurus who came to America, he already had a foothold. And George, who was looking for spiritual life, came in contact with him. And Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, if you go to Rishikesh at Ram Jula, there's Lakshman Jula and there's Ram Jula. So at Ram Jula, behind where they have the big Ganga Arti, you go a few roads down, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has his ashram there. It's empty there. Now there's nobody there anymore. But in those days, he used to invite his students to come there for additional training. So George Harrison, since he had met Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he influenced all the Beatles that come along with me to India. I found a guru. And he also had other people, other friends who were actresses and other musicians like Donovan and people like that. He said, let's all go together to India. So he took them all to Rishikesh, to Maharishi Mahesh Yogi's ashram. And they were looking for spiritual life, but they had some very unfortunate experiences there because not all yogis follow the four regulative principles, unfortunately. So they were quite disillusioned, and they rejected him and went back to London. And then also at that time in the 60s, of course, spiritual life, especially amongst the young people, since they were so disillusioned with material life of their parents and seeing that all these political tensions and wars, they didn't want to have anything to do with that. So they were looking for alternatives. And one book from India came to the West. That's the autobiography of Paramahansa Yogananda. So many young people had read that and got some inspiration to take up spiritual life, which was not exactly what Prabhupada taught, of course, but at least there was some inclination for learning about Eastern philosophy. But Prabhupada's instructions in particular. See, Prabhupada, he was Krishna's devotee. He was Bhagavad-Gita as it is, that Krishna spoke Bhagavad-Gita, we should surrender to Krishna, we should become Krishna's devotee. Prabhupada never changed his philosophy. Everything was just Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. And the scholars used to criticize that he just has a one-track mind, Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Even when Krishna's not mentioned, he adds Krishna. And Prabhupada, yes, that's because Krishna's everywhere. So Prabhupada was only interested in helping us understand who Krishna is and how to become his devotees. So George really liked that. And he was very friendly with the devotees and loved Srila Prabhupada. George goes on. Prabhupada helped me to realize the multifaceted way to approach Krishna. Like the prasadam, for example. I think it is a very important thing, prasadam, even if it's only a trick. So I look at this feast that they made for him. They knew that George was coming by that day, and suddenly they had 20 preparations ready for him. And he saw it as a trick because everyone loves prasadam. It's so wonderful. So you get drawn in. All of us got drawn in. By even Pramodananda Saraswati, he always tells the story how he became a devotee because Bibhu Chaitanya used to feed him the Mahaprasadam, and that's how he became attracted. So we've all had our wonderful experience with the potency of taking Krishna Prasadam. Like they say, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Well, even if it's a way to a man's spirit soul, it works. Because there is nothing better than having been dancing and singing or just sitting and talking, and then suddenly they give you some food. It's like it's a blessing. And then when you learn to touch him or taste him, it's important. So he was understanding the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, how through the senses we can understand Krishna, tasting him by prasadam. Krishna is not limited. This is George continuing. And just by Prabhupada's being there and pouring out all this information, I was moved. It's like the mind is stubborn, but it's all Krishna. That's all you need to know. It's all Krishna. This world is his material energy too, the universal form. And in Prabhupada's books, there are these pictures showing Krishna in the heart of a dog and a cow and a human being. It helps you to realize that Krishna is within everybody. So at this time, when George first met Prabhupada personally, the Bhagavad-Gita had not yet been printed, but very soon after, within a few months, the Bhagavad-Gita, with so many beautiful paintings, was printed by Macmillan. And he's speaking about these original paintings in the first edition of the Bhagavad-Gita by Macmillan. Although Prabhupada might have been teaching some higher aspect, what came through to me a lot was a greater understanding of how Krishna is everywhere and in everything. Prabhupada explained about the different aspects of Krishna, and he provided a meditation where you could see Krishna as a person everywhere. I mean, there isn't anything that isn't Krishna. So he had become Krishna conscious just by Prabhupada's association, by hearing from Srila Prabhupada, by reading his books, by associating with the devotees. Prabhu, you have to tell me when it's 5:30, okay? Abhi kitna baje hai? Huh? Aapka, haan, de do. Prabhupada saw George as a nice young boy. He's one of the most popular personalities on the earth planet. Prabhupada saw him as a nice young boy and a devotee of Krishna. According to the Bhagavatam, no matter what a person may be materially, if he is a non-devotee and never utters the holy name of God, he cannot possess any good qualities. Many swamis and yogis in India, even some who considered themselves Vaishnavas, had no faith in or understanding of the holy names of Krishna. But George liked to chant Hare Krishna, and he had put the holy name of Krishna in his songs, which were tremendously popular all over the world. So he was serving Krishna through his music, and that made all the difference. His songs about Krishna were so popular in the West. Most people had never heard of Krishna in the Western countries. But because of George Harrison's songs, where he openly would chant Hare Krishna in his songs, that way they got to hear about Krishna. And he would wear pictures of Krishna on his shirts. I mean, he was really advertising Krishna and helping people understand who Krishna is. Krishna's emissary. Mr. George Harrison appears to be a very intelligent boy, and he is, by the grace of Krishna, fortunate also. On the first day, he came to see me along with John Lennon, and we had talks about 2 hours He wanted to talk with me more, but he has now gone to his sick mother in Liverpool. So Srila Prabhupada was quite impressed by how serious George was about the philosophy, and he gave him as much time as he was able to, despite George's busy schedule, and tried to help him understand Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada also saw George as a rich man, and Lord Chaitanya had strictly instructed devotees in the renounced order not to mix with worldly men. But Lord Chaitanya had also taught that a devotee should accept any favorable opportunity for propagating Krishna consciousness. So George, on his own, he came here at least 2 times. He came here before the temple was opened during the construction, and then he came a few years later, and he stayed where our Vani ashram is now, because Prithu Prabhu owned that ashram at that time, and he became George Harrison's host, and he was taking him to all of the holy places then. And George also, on his own, he went to Mayapur. He met with His Holiness Jayapataka Swami. And even this early, Srila Prabhupada would discuss his plans for Mayapur, for a spiritual township, 10,000 devotees at Lord Chaitanya's birthplace. So Prabhupada, he was simply sharing with George Harrison all of his wonderful plans for distributing books, for printing books, for building temples. And George was very interested in helping Prabhupada. It was George who printed the first volume of the Krishna book for Srila Prabhupada. If this boy cooperates with our movement, it will be very nice impetus, for after all, he is a moneyed man. These moneyed men have to be very cautiously dealt with in spiritual life. We have to sometimes deal with them on account of preaching work. Otherwise, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has strictly restricted to mix with them for Krishna conscious people. But we get instruction from Rupa Goswami that whatever opportunity is favorable for pushing on Krishna consciousness, we should accept. So that is the principle of Yukta Vairagya. Although we're not interested in associating with moneyed people, as Prabhupada calls them, if there's a way that we can engage people in Krishna's service, then we associate with them just so that they can advance in Krishna consciousness. So George, he was naturally attracted to the Devotees Association, to chanting Hare Krishna, to Prasadam, to Srila Prabhupada, and he voluntarily helped the devotees. Prabhupada dealt with George cautiously, but encouraged him to chant the Lord's name, take his prasadam, and surrender all his works to him. Him meaning Krishna. When the devotees in the US heard of Prabhupada's dealings with the Beatles, some of them exaggerated the closeness of the relationship, especially in the case of John Lennon. Prabhupada heard of this and immediately stopped it. So this is a picture of John Lennon with his wife, Yoko Ono. And because they were the owners of the property, naturally the devotees would interact with John. But as we heard a little bit earlier, John's friends warned him not to get too involved with the devotees. So he kept a distance, although George was very friendly with the devotees. This is Prabhupada in a letter. Regarding the booklet you and Gargamuni are sending, in the introductory portion signed by you and Gargamuni, you have said that I am, quote, personally instructing John Lennon and George Harrison in the yoga of ecstasy, unquote. This is not very satisfactory. Of course, George Harrison sometimes comes to see me, and naturally, I instruct him on the bhakti-yoga. But the statement in the letter gives hint as if I have been invited by them for this. If this comes to their notice, they may take some objection which will not go to our credit. These things should not be publicly advertised, and I do not know why this has been done. Anyway, if you have not distributed many of them, you just tried to take out the portion which is not a fact. So eventually, as always, when Srila Prabhupada would have conversations, morning walks, lectures, interviews, the devotees would be recording what Prabhupada said. So when George and John Lennon would come to see Prabhupada, those conversations were being recorded. And later they were made into 2 books. The first book is called Search for Liberation, and it's a conversation between John Lennon and questions that he's asking Srila Prabhupada. So that was a very popular book in those days that we were distributing. The other book was called Chant and Be Happy. So that's the conversations when George and John were speaking to Prabhupada. George, Prabhupada never really suggested that I shouldn't do what I was doing. I heard that at different times he would say to the devotees that I was a better devotee because of my songs and the other things I was doing. He never actually said that to me, but I always heard that. Again, Srila Prabhupada, he's so expert in his personal relationships with people. He wouldn't directly praise George. That's dangerous for a spiritual master to praise a disciple. Then it's considered the spiritual master becomes an enemy. The disciple is supposed to correct, the spiritual master is supposed to correct the disciple. But Srila Prabhupada would speak to other devotees, and those devotees would come and tell George how Prabhupada was praising him, that by his singing and the other services he was doing, he was a better devotee than they were. And the good thing for me was that I didn't have a feeling that I needed to join full time. I think it would have spoiled it if he had always been on me at saying, why don't you pack in doing what you're doing and go and live in a temple somewhere? He never made me feel any different, like I wasn't quite in the club. He was never like that. So George, he was just part of the family. He would sing with the devotees, he would eat with the devotees, he would talk with the devotees. He was just part of the group. And he didn't feel any different. He didn't feel superior to them. He didn't feel inferior because he hadn't given his whole life to Prabhupada. No, they accepted him and he accepted them. And that way he was able to maintain all of the wonderful service he was doing by singing about Krishna, by traveling and introducing people to the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, because he was very influential amongst the youth in those days. I'm a plainclothes devotee. Now here we have in our temple, maybe you don't even know it, but we have plainclothes policemen, not policemen, but guards. Some of our guards, they'll dress up as ordinary pilgrims and they'll mingle to see if there are any thieves or pickpockets. And they'll be in the temple, and they're plainclothes, they're dressing just like everybody else, but actually they're guards. So George called himself a plainclothes devotee because he would dress as a normal person. He wouldn't wear sika and kurta and dhoti, but he was a devotee in ordinary clothes. I saw my relationship that I should help when and where I could because I know people in society. It's like any half-decent person. You just try and help each other a little bit. So he didn't help a little bit, he helped a lot. He had them cut records. Cut means they produced records. Those records went all over the world. He helped them to sign papers of assurance for getting the temple. Anytime there was any legal problem or any loan that was needed, he was always ready to help the devotees. He would donate marble for the altar, everything he could possibly think of from his heart. He was doing that just as a service to the devotees. He was always pleased with me because anything I did was a help. I mean, not just to the Krishna temple as such, but just to anything spiritual that I did, either through songs or whatever. It pleased him. He was just always very friendly. He was always chanting, and at times he said that to me, just to keep chanting all the time, or as much as possible. I think once you do that, you realize the chanting is of benefit. So George, he stayed in contact with the devotees up to the end of his life. They were with him. He got cancer, and at that time he isolated himself so that he could just concentrate on spiritual life, be with his family, be with the devotees. And he left this world chanting Hare Krishna, and his funeral was at the Bhaktivedanta Manor. So up to the end of his life, from the time he met Prabhupada, up until that time when he left this world, he remained a devotee chanting Hare Krishna. So now we'll have the next speaker, which will be His Holiness Gaurav Narayan Maharaj, because it's 5:30 now. Hare Krishna, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.